Alright, let's imagine this. You're at work and your colleague walks by without saying hello. You might quickly assume that they're intentionally hurting you because of that small action, and you feel a sense of resentment and confusion. And now let's picture this one. Another instance, you may receive a critical email from a client and you're tempted to respond with a very defensive tone regarding the emphasis on the amount of criticism that you've received. As you can see from these two scenarios, they are very unfavorable. There's something that could have been avoided in the first place, that should never have happened. We tend to respond back intensely in order to defend our reputations. But the issue with that kind of approach is that it can lead to the scenarios being a lot more complicated and relationships being a little bit tainted. But it doesn't have to be this way. And that's why in this video, I'm going to tell you a mental model that I personally learned, and it has really changed the course of how I approach conflict and any other unfavorable situation, and actually using this for my own advantage. It's called Hanlon's razor, and it's a very special mental model that I took to heart that allows me to go about any work situation where I can approach things a lot more smoothly and not making them any more complicated by responding back the same way that they responded to me very critically. I'm going to be explaining to you what Hanlon's razor actually is. I'm also going to share a little personal story about this and one piece of commentary that I found with Hanlon's razor, and also a big call to action so that you could start implementing this mental model in your everyday lives. Alright, you ready? Let's get into it. So first off, what is Hanlon's razor? Hanlon's razor is based around this philosophical statement that the founder, who I believe is called Robert J. Hanlon, and he states, "Never attribute to malice what can be explained by stupidity." So I'll repeat that again. Never attribute to malice what can be explained by stupidity. So essentially, what we're taking in from this statement is that we shouldn't respond back to a situation with so much drama and nor any anger towards a particular situation that you didn't want to happen, that was probably caused by a bit of a rash action, and encourages us also to avoid misunderstandings. And the reason why it is called a razor, as in the case you might have seen with Occam's razor, is that it's designed to shave off any unnecessary assumptions. You're imagining using this hypothetical sharp object or razor, and you're cutting off any unnecessary assumptions that may have come across in a particular situation, and you're all simplifying it down to the simplest explanation for a given context. And Occam's razor actually explicitly says that if you're surrounded by many different options and you're not sure which one to choose, typically the simplest one tends to be the better one. Now, from this explanation alone, there can be some pros and cons with this, and the same thing when we come to Hanlon's razor. But Hanlon's razor I found to be probably the most inspiring of all the mental models that I've actually come across, because we're actually dealing with, instead of decision making, as opposed to Occam's razor, we're dealing with conflict. Conflict is a very special term, something that, like, we don't really want, but it's inevitable that it's probably gonna happen. And Hanlon's razor is sort of used as a special way to help navigate through this in a more healthy fashion, by never responding back with such malice to what can only be explained by some kind of rash action or stupidity. Or maybe a more understandable way to put this, misunderstandings. It can only be explained by someone who may have misinterpreted something in a different way because they had some factors around that you yourself who received this criticism may not have been aware of. Going back to this critical email that I explained to you in the beginning, this is an exchange between two people, and the sender who expressed this critical email to the receiver, the sender had his own interpretations, he had his own factors around him. Those that are first instincts, those that he probably analyzed, compared to the receiver, who may not have had the same interpretation as he did. You can see how this razor is sort of appreciating all the interpretations that we have from day to day, and making sure that those interpretations don't get spat on or completely dismissed. So now I want to share with you a bit of a personal story on why I consider this probably a very powerful mental model for you to take in. So, as you probably know, I work full-time as a pharmacist, which is a very, very stressful job. Let's do this. And particularly if you work in a hospital where there is a lot more patients to see across all the wards, But the best thing about this one compared to like you see on the high street, you do have a lot of cooperation between different sectors of the hospital. So you have like a communication with the doctors, with the nurses, and of course our own colleagues. But as you know, because it is a very stressful job, taking it to a deeper approach, so stress can really reshape in our minds, and it can almost be it can almost like turn us into what I call alter egos. It can turn us into completely different people that we've never been before in the past, as if we were trying our best to respond to the stress, but we end up responding to it not in a way to favor both sides. And because also we're dealing with patients, it can sort of reshape in our minds to have like a patient first approach, which is very, very important, and we should always keep the patient in mind. But what I've been seeing with everyone like around, even my own colleagues, sometimes they feel like they seem to be more sensitive towards any events that could potentially have an impact on the patient, even like tiniest of events, and what impact it could have on the patient, because we don't want the patient to be hurt or something. If I see like another colleague of mine and he or she seems to ask me like a bit of a technical, simple question that like almost anyone can answer, it's kind of a temptation to say like, how could you not know that? That is such a stupid question. But then when I came across the mental model itself, it sort of forced me to ask them like how they actually got to it in a much more calm and understandable sense, and also allow them to verify their understanding to get a clearer picture, so that I know what led to them to ask this question, despite being simple as it is. If I were to fall into my alter ego and act out very reactively, which I still do from time to time, like internally, everyone has an alter ego, but if I do fall into the reactive side of me that lashes, that like gets a little bit frustrated with my colleague, then that's when misunderstandings can occur and conflicts can arise, probably unnecessarily. So by having this mental model across the way that I can use throughout my job and even from my everyday life outside of work, it just helps me to like be more open-minded and giving these people just the spotlight to verify their understanding, so that I can just actively listen and see what led them to this situation and see if there is something they may have misinterpreted, and then maybe I can humbly teach them something. But yeah, it really has changed the way I approach things and the way I perceive conflicts, so that one day, hopefully, a bit of a universal problem that we can finally resolve conflicts in a much more healthier approach, which I'm sort of trying to do my part in playing this video, which is a bit of a puzzle, which not just me, but I think all of us are trying to solve. And speaking of puzzles, if you are interested in more mental models, pattern recognition, then you'd like to check out my newsletter down in the description below called Pattern Puzzles, where every week I sent out a newsletter and you could join a tribe who are willing to get a clarified perspective and think more smartly for a brighter future. So check out the newsletter in the description down below. I really appreciate it, and it helps support the channel. Alright, so I want to now go through this commentary that I've seen relating to Hanlon's razor, and the reason why I call it a commentary is that I haven't seen any official studies relating to the success of Hanlon's razor that's used in work. If you come across like mental models like Hanlon's razor, like Occam's razor, they're not really proven techniques, hence why they have like pros and cons. In fact, any technique that you use will have ups and downs, but I haven't seen any official studies about those. But I came across this commentary paper, and the benefits they explained of using this is that it promotes more humility and civility. Humility is probably one of the most underrated values that the world actually, I think, could do more of. Like I said, it forces you to take a step back and give someone else the spotlight without any assumptions getting in the way of things. But the commentary does point out a little bit of a warning that, particularly if you over-rely on just a single mental model like Hanlon's razor, and particularly in that context, you could be taken advantage of by malicious actors. Because even though you're constantly trying to take a step back and you're not rely on your own beliefs so that you can effectively listen to people, which is very good and everyone should be doing it, what the commentary actually describes is you could actually treat your knowledge as like something that's not being relied upon, and your beliefs are going to be overwhelmed all the time. And particularly when you apply this to like bigger situations like moral debates, this is where like your side could be discredited because of you being overwhelmed. Thinking very differently requires the use of a combination of many other mental models, and how they actually connect with one another give a much better understanding of things. And the paper in its conclusion actually ends with a very nice quote. It says here, "Hanlon's razor is not a machete for judging others. It's more like a scalpel. We should handle it with care." So with all the exciting prospects that adopting Hanlon's razor can offer, now I want to give you a bit of a call to action so you can reduce those misunderstandings that we all want to avoid. So first off, you want to take a step back. Make the conscious effort to pause and reflect. We want to avoid snap decisions all the time. We need to think fast on our feet at some points, but when it comes to taking a step back, this is why I recommend to everyone to have like some kind of reflective practice, maybe outside of work, in your own time. So you're sitting down alone with your thoughts, maybe have like a journaling technique that you can actually think about yourself and analyze how you're thinking about the world. And maybe if conflict is something that has been on your radar and been a problem that you've been facing, this is probably something you can take to heart and write this down for your own benefit. Recognize the misunderstandings will happen. It's inevitable that we're going to get these misunderstandings, even if we constantly try to train ourselves to avoid them. But the key here is just to keep that open mind and practice this by having like a journaling technique so you can get into the habit of automatically stepping back and giving yourself an open mind about things. Next up, translate this open mind into your communication. Practice communicating very openly and very honestly. Even just like a simple conversation, like with your friend, can actually clarify misunderstandings. And lastly, practice empathy. Remember, the misunderstandings arise from this exchange between people because we all have different perceptions without knowing about what our opponent's perceptions were. So that is why you need to imagine putting yourself in other people's shoes. It's very simple, but it can be very effective for this. Alright, thank you so much for watching this video. I want to hear from you in the comments down below on how you would going about practicing empathy and this mental model itself. So yeah, let me know down in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Do subscribe to the newsletter if you can, and I will see you in the next video.